Good morning. Tori Lang was the 18-year-old daughter of Teresa and Tori Lang, originally of New Orleans, Louisiana. She was a recent graduate of Stevenson High and, by all accounts, a bright, effervescent, beautiful young woman. I did not have the pleasure of knowing her, and her mother and her grandmother are far better equipped than I to tell you about Tori when she was alive. The last time Tori was seen in their neighborhood, leaving the area in which they lived, was about 10:30 on July 27th of 2021. She was seen on a neighbor's ring cam video leaving the area in her car. As far as Teresa and Tori knew, she just did not come back. There was just a sheer coincidence. Teresa was changing the family's cell phone account. So she had Tori's cell phone in order to port the number over from one carrier to another. So they couldn't call Tori. The following morning, Tori still didn't come home. So they reached out to her friends, or the people at least she thought were her friends. One of the people who Teresa reached out to was the defendant, Austin Ford. Austin told Teresa he hadn't seen Tori, didn't know where Tori was. But vowed that he'd look for her, and that if he heard anything, he'd let her know. He never let her know. Simultaneously, at about 6:33 in the morning, July 28th, Theodore Young and his wife were taking their morning walk in Yellow River Park. Mr. Young is an older gentleman, will go through the park and pick up cans, goes walking early in the morning. It was August, so it's probably going to be really, really hot. I'm sorry, July. Still hot. He sees what appears to be a person lying under a tree. He gets closer, and what he finds is the body of a young woman who has been shot one time in the head. Mr. Young called to her to see if she was still alive, noticed that she was not. Police. Officers with the Gwinnett County Police Department, specifically Officer Casey Smith and Officer Remy, responded to the scene. They're both uniformed patrol officers. Officer Smith was training Officer Remy. And they did what patrol officers are supposed to do. They assessed the scene, determined that there was more things that they could handle, noted what they could note, and waited for detectives who would do a more thorough investigation of who this young woman might be and what might have happened to her. They did, the patrol officers, Officer Remy and Officer Rachel Lasky, did locate 2 shell casings. They didn't do anything with the shell casings. What they did was just mark them first with a piece of paper so that they would not be disturbed, so other officers would know not to step on them, kick them, or otherwise disturb what could be crucial evidence in whatever happened to this young woman who was found here dead. They then turned the scene over to detectives. The initial responding detective was then Corporal David Smith. Now, what happens after the evidence is marked and what's there is roped off by the patrol officers? crime scene investigation and the medical examiner are called. The crime scene investigation, or CSI, with Gwinnett County will take measurements of the scene. They will collect the shell casings, photographs, videos to document the scene so that detectives will have all the information that is available in order to solve what is now apparently a case. The only physical evidence that CSI was able to locate was the 2 shell casings. They did not find any vehicle that appeared to be hers. They went so far as to have a police academy class basically canvass the entire area, lined up side by side, walked the entirety of the park, because as you'll see, it's ultimately a very large area. But they didn't find anything. All we've got from the scene is 2 shell casings. I'll talk to you a little bit about the shell casings later. They then turned the investigation over to the detectives. Over to the medical examiner. Medical examiner's office came and they do what they're supposed to do. The medical examiner's role is to examine the remains of the young lady and to make a determination of cause and manner of death. That is done through collecting observations at the scene and through an autopsy. The autopsy was performed by Dr. Tori. I don't think I need to explain exactly what an autopsy is, but that took place on July 28th of 2021 and into July 29th of 2021. Now, mind you, at this time, as far as the police, the medical examiner go, this is an unknown young woman. She didn't have any ID. There was, at this time, no way to tell just who she was. She did have photos, she did have tattoos, and so officers were able to take pictures of her tattoos in hopes to identify her. The medical examiner, Dr. Terry, did make certain observations relating to, and didn't make a ruling on them. What Dr. Terry will testify to is that she was killed by a single gunshot to the head that occurred from 10 to 12 inches away. Now, she can tell that by the manner in which the bullet entered Tori's head and by other physical traces that were left by the shot itself. She is, again, far better equipped to tell you about that than I am, but essentially you can tell to a point how far away a gun is fired. If it was very close up, there would be stippling burning. If it's further, there are powder burns. And if it's even further out, there are none of those things present, and so the range would be undetermined. But in this case, Dr. Terry was able to determine that it was between 10 to 12 inches away from Tori's head. She determined that Tori was lying in the place that she was found when she was shot.
You know, it's been a while since I watched this prosecutor give his opening statement in this trial. It happened in April, but this doesn't seem that far off to me than what we saw before. Are they going to get a different result this time? I will tell you, retrials do tend to favor the state or the Commonwealth. They do, just historically. We'll see what happens, though. Tweet us right now. Let us know. We're going to hit a break. When we come back, more of the opening statements. We'll pick up right where we're leaving off. This is Court TV Live. We are your front row seat to justice.
Nobody ever plans to end up in a room like this. Everyday people caught up in a plan to commit murder.
Did you kill your mother?
Yes, I did. The ultimate betrayals, friends and family turning on each other.
Spell was broken when the handcuffs went click.
But just who is the puppet? And who's pulling the strings?
Accomplice to Murder with Fanny Politan. Tonight, 7, 6 Central.
Only on Court TV.
Thanks for staying with us. Let's go back to the courtroom now and hear more of the state's opening statement in the case against Austin Ford.
Which ultimately does mean that the location of the gun at the time it was fired can be extrapolated. Though, because of what was there, what was not there, Dr. Terry was not able to make a determination about the manner of death. So the manner of death in this case is undetermined. But keep in mind, this ruling, this report, and this determination were made on the 29th of July. Meanwhile, at some point, members of Tori's family are able to identify her tattoos by a photograph that have been put out into the news media. And the young woman who officers found in the park now has a name, Tori Lang. Corporal Smith goes to speak with the Lang family and notify them that their daughter has in fact been located and what has happened to her. They also learn that Teresa's Sig Sauer P365 is no longer in her home. Armed now only with this, the investigation continues on. They continue to speak to Tori's friends. They continue to gather information. Due to promotion and just the natural shuffling of the police department, Corporal Smith was promoted and a different detective was assigned to the case, Detective Angela Carter. She continues the investigation from where Corporal Smith picked up. Now, one thing Corporal Smith did find before he turned the case over to Detective Carter was that where Austin Ford lived, his neighbor had a ring camera. The ring camera captured Tori coming over to Austin's house around 10:40 p.m. on July 27th. It later captured them leaving together shortly thereafter. And you can see that Tori appears to be wearing the clothes in which she's found when she is leaving with the defendant. The ring camera later catches the defendant coming home, maybe about 1:40 in the morning, wearing something different. Detective Carter speaks to the defendant by phone, and he continues to, I'll just say it, lie. He does not admit that he was with Tori that night. He doesn't admit that he was at Yellow Park. He does not admit that he knew what happened to Tori. Mind you, this was a friend of hers, supposedly. This was supposed to be a friend. This is a young man who her mother knew her to associate with. A man who, when she was looking for Tori and worried, she thought that this supposed friend would know where she was, would be helpful in finding her, and maybe alleviate her fears that something terrible had happened to her daughter. That's not what he did. He just said, I don't know where she is, and pretended to look for her. But he knew where she was. He went to her funeral. Hugged her mother. Knowing all the while exactly what had happened to Tori. I'll explain why. He did mysteriously skip the vigil that the family held shortly after Tori's murder at the park, at the location of her death. The defendant, though notified, though supposedly her friend, he didn't go to that. But Detective Carter's investigation also involved getting the defendant's cell phone records and his geolocation through Google. One thing a lot of people don't know about Google is Google tells on you. Google tells on you a lot. If you have a Google app on your phone, it is reporting to Google what your location is. Now, the purpose of this is Google's, and it has to do with advertising and making sure that you get relevant ads because businesses pay money to have their ads put in front of you. And if I am standing at 75 Langley Drive, a business somewhere near 75 Langley Drive might want to show me an ad so that while I'm here, I can patronize their business. So using a search warrant, we were able to get those records, along with his phone records. And they show a couple of things. What they show is Austin Ford's phone bouncing off of cell towers near Yellow River Park around the time he left his apartment with Tori on the Ring camera. Then it stops. There's no more pinging, no more nothing. Which would indicate that the phone is no longer sending a signal out. Well, how would a phone not send a signal out? Because you turn it off. The phone then reappears after 1 in the morning, moving at a rate that is faster than one could walk. What is that? Well, that means that he wasn't walking, he was probably in a car. It's simply a matter of if you're at, because it doesn't follow you like a little video where you see the dot moving on the map like they do in the on TV. That's TV. It shows locations and times. And you can calculate the speed it takes to travel between the two locations if you're given the times. And Detective Carter was able to determine that he had to be moving faster than at a pace that someone would walk. Plain and simple. Detective Carter, now armed with this information about his phone records, about his geolocation, the fact that he did not call Tori after she was killed, his supposed best friend, his alleged friend who is lying dead in Yellow River Park, who has told his mother, her mother, I'm going to help you look for her, I'm going to help find her. But he doesn't call her, not one time. Not because he knew about recording of the cell phone number and where Tori's phone actually was, but because he knew she wasn't going to answer. So armed with this information, Detective Carter interviews the defendant.
What do you think, my Cordy friends? Are things going to play out differently for this prosecution team? I'm not so sure based on this opening statement. Hit us up on Twitter. Let us know. We're going to hit a break. When we come back at the top of the hour, we're going to play more of these opening statements for you. We'll hear from the defense. There is Austin Ford in the courtroom. He's accused of murdering his best friend. This is Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice. This This is Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice. I'm your host, Julie Grant. Thank you for being with us on this Tuesday morning. We got a brand new trial just starting up this morning in Georgia. This is a case where the prosecution is getting a second bite at the apple because this is a retrial for defendant Austin Ford. He's being accused of murdering his best friend, Tori Lang. But the state has some problems in its case. Will they be able to tell a story that this jury believes about how Tori Lang died? Last time they couldn't, and the jury was deadlocked. Was it suicide? Was it assisted suicide? Was this a murder? The state's got to be more clear with their theory this time around. That is for sure. The state's delivering. It's open. Let's pick up now where we left off in our last hour.
And for the first part of the interview, he continues on with the same line of reasoning and story that he has perpetuated from the beginning. He tries to cast off responsibility for Tori's death onto Scoop. You'll find out Scoop was, I do not remember his name right now, but he was Tori's sometime boyfriend. Agent Carter was able to determine Detective Carter was able to determine that he was somewhere else at the time. But the defendant keeps bringing him up, keeps trying to cast aspersions onto him. And he continues to do that throughout the interview. Well, at some point, Detective Carter confronts him with the information that she had. I know your cell phone. I know you were with her that night. I know that you left, and it was probably in her car because you were moving faster than you could have been moving if you were walking. The defendant now changes his story. What he tells Detective Carter is that he was with Tori the night of the 27th. That she came to his house despondent and suicidal. That they went to Yellow River Park and he saw that she had her mother's gun. He says they talked in the park, that she told him she was going to hurt herself, that he took the gun from her, placed it on the ground, gave her a hug, that she pushed him away, grabbed the gun, and shot herself in the head. That's the story that he told Detective Carter. He continued on into that he was scared. So he took the gun. He took her car. The gun he disposed of by throwing it in a pond somewhere in DeKalb County. Divers checked the pond, couldn't find the gun, but it was a year after he threw the gun in the pond that they were finally able to check. But the gun was never found. But it wasn't on the scene, which is important. He took her car, and his description was that he parked it in the cut. And it's plain term, an alley, just kind of an out of the way place. So he parked the car somewhere, and then he just went back home. The car was found August 1st in a nature preserve in DeKalb County, burned to the frame. Now, unfortunately, there was no evidence that was able to be recovered from the car. It was so completely burned, there's not really a way to determine whether or not even an accelerant was used. But the car was essentially burned down to the frame. This is a murder. Now, Dr. Terry is going to tell you that the manner and cause of death is undetermined. But she made that ruling and that determination on July 29th, 2021, without being a party to or privy to the cover-up, or attempted cover-up by the defendant, without knowing that the car was burned, without knowing any of the other information that was gathered afterwards. Now, some of that has been given to her, and that would not necessarily change her rule. But this is why we have Dr. Terry's determination of manner of cause or death is not what determines whether or not somebody is guilty of murder. That is the 14 Murder in Georgia, as charged, is felony murder, is committing a felony during which the death of another is caused. Well, the notion that Tori picked up a gun off the ground and shot herself in the side of the head 10 to 12 inches away in such a way that it severed her brainstem, which would have stopped her movement, functioning, heartbeat, breathing, almost instantly, while laying down, is far-fetched. The only reasonable way this could have happened involves this defendant's hand on a firearm, which is a deadly weapon. And to point a firearm at another person is aggravated assault. There are other charges on the indictment, voluntary manslaughter and 2 counts of possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. The top 2 counts, though, 10 to 12 inches away, everybody knows what a foot is. It's just not a common way to commit suicide. It's, as described by the defendant, just unlikely. It's also contradictory to the physical evidence found by Dr. Terry. Those findings, those physical findings, those are important. In fact, in particular, that she was where she was when she was shot, because that determines where the firearm was. And those are facts. When you look at the situation as a whole, after hearing the evidence from the stand, after seeing video, after seeing photos, I'm going to come back and ask you to find this defendant guilty, in particular, of felony murder and aggravated assault. Because they will have proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's just what it sounds like, a reasonable doubt. It's not a burden the state shies away from. It's not a burden that the state is scared of, afraid of, or feels the need to over-explain to you, but one that it proudly picks up and says, this murderer is guilty of murder. Look at him cover up his murder.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Opening statements in a criminal jury trial is supposed to be, and is typically where lawyers outline what they believe the evidence is going to be in the case, the evidence that you're going to hear and see from the witness stand. And that evidence typically consists of facts. Evidence is facts, not feelings. There will be 5 undisputed facts in the case. Fact number 1, the morning of July 28th, 2021, Tori Lang died by gunshot wound in Yellow River Park. That's an undisputed fact. That's the first undisputed fact. The second undisputed fact is Austin Ford is the only other person that's present, if you believe his statement to the police, when Tori Lang is shot, and he, Austin Ford, tells the police Tori Lang shot herself. That's an undisputed fact. The third undisputed fact, Austin Ford talks to the police face to face 8 months after Tori Lang dies, which is also 8 months after the medical examiner has made the determination, I cannot tell if it is a homicide or a suicide. Medical examiner and Austin Ford didn't get together. The medical examiner makes a determination on July 29th, 2021. I cannot tell, based on the science, whether it was a suicide or a homicide. Well, she made that determination back on July 29th. She sticks by that very determination April of 2023. As we sit here today, there's no other medical examiner, expert, or scientist that has contradicted Dr. Terry. So that brings us to the fourth fact. Dr. Carol Terry has just extensive experience. She's gonna tell you she's got like 61 or 6,200 autopsies. Let me just tell you right now, that's a very conservative number. That's a very conservative number. She probably has closer to 7,000 or 8,000 autopsies. Since 1990, when she began the study of pathology, when I mean study, I mean the residency. Medical school's over, she does a 5-year residency. She is and has been devoted to pathology. Absolutely devoted. So she's done 6,000 autopsies, and she will testify under oath the same way she testified at a prior hearing in April of 2023, that she can determine with scientific certainty that Tori Lang was lying down, face up, when she was shot. But she will tell you, Dr. Terry will, I cannot determine, the science cannot determine whether Tori Lang committed suicide or if somebody else shot her. That's the fourth fact. That's what Dr. Terry's gonna tell you. Facts, not feelings. The fifth fact is, and you're gonna learn this, the gun that Tori Lang brings to Yellow River Park belongs to her family. Tori Lang brings the gun and then shoots herself. There's no contradiction to that. The state now wants to talk about all the possibilities. Are the possibilities supported in the evidence? Well, that's not really that important because we get into our feelings now. We get into our feelings. He was supposed to be her friend. Listen, can we just stick with the facts? The facts. Dr. Carol Terry, looking at the science, says it's just as likely that it was a suicide as it was a homicide. Now, we're gonna twist that up. We're gonna spend 3 days twisting that line right there up. We're gonna twist and twist. It's assisted suicide because it's definitely not count 3. I was mad and then I decided to shoot. It's definitely not gonna be result of a sudden, violent, and irresistible passion resulting from serious provocation. It's not gonna be that at all because the science is undisputed that Tori Lang lies down, face up when the bullet pierces her head. So there's not going to be any evidence of sudden, violent, or irresistible. That's just there. That's just there. I guess if you don't like the murder charge, so here's the only question you're gonna have to deal with. Is it suicide, in which case my client is not guilty of anything, or is it assisted suicide, which is illegal? Because there's no question, based on the science, that's unrefuted. No expert. And Dr. Terry has not changed her opinion at all. So we're gonna go back and forth and we're gonna twist this all around, but I'm telling you now what you're gonna have to determine. And the state would like for you, get into your feelings and overrule the science. What? Let's just go with the facts. The judge will tell you at the end of trial, we gotta look at the facts. You gotta put your common sense with the facts. And when you put your common sense with the facts, the only just verdict in this case is gonna be a not guilty on all the charges. Thank you very much. Thank you, Judge.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lawrence Lewis.